Calm down.
Police body cameras capture the moments after the caller, Chacey Poynter, dialed 911.
What's going on?
My husband, he went to go help me. My Jeep is stuck in the back, around the corner, and he's been shot in the head, please.
That's my husband's blood.
Just breathe for me.
That's my husband's blood on me.
What's his name?
Robert Poynter.
This is Chacey Poynter. In 2016, she was 29. She'd been married to Bob Poynter, who was 18 years her senior, for 7 years. On September 9th, she met with Bob on a muddy back road, isolated and dark. Only one of them would survive the encounter. But who was to blame for Bob's tragic death? Chacey claimed her husband had been killed at random.
What happened?
I heard a shot, and the Jeep started rolling, and I didn't see anything, and I saw a shadow. That's all I saw.
No.
But the police were suspicious. Was she really just an innocent witness to a horrible crime? A wife traumatized by the murder of her husband? This is the chilling case of Chacey and Bob Poynter. Robert Poynter, known as Bob, was a firefighter. Despite being a tall and imposing figure, the 47-year-old was described as fun-loving and non-confrontational. He'd worked as a firefighter for nearly 20 years and had reached the rank of captain. When Hurricane Katrina struck in 2005, he was involved with relief efforts. He had 2 children from his first marriage. The first marriage to his high school sweetheart, Amy, had lasted for 19 years before it began to break down when Bob met Chacey Tyler Mormon. Chacey was born and raised in Texas. She worked in a dental office as a surgical assistant and implant coordinator. But her passion was baking. Chacey ran a cake-making business called Fabulously Frosted. She met the married Bob through a mutual friend, and despite the 18-year age gap, they hit it off immediately. He began to devote more attention to this 20-year-old at the cost of his existing marriage. Bob's daughter discovered he had a second cell phone. Chacey claimed that she didn't know Amy and Bob were still together at the time.
As far as I knew, he was separated.
One of Bob's firefighter friends, however, said that Amy pursued him. They got together in December 2007. Bob, 40, divorced Amy, and he married Chacey, who was 22. 2 years later, they had a daughter together, Addison, and moved together in Chacey's hometown of Royce City. Bob worked in nearby University Park, a peaceful, wealthy community. It was nearer home, however, that things took a dark turn for him and his marriage to Chacey. Late at night on September 9, 2016, 7 years into their marriage, 29-year-old Chacey drove her car down a rural road. Bob met her there. The next thing anyone heard from the couple was a phone call to 911.
She's pinging on Kenner at 2595, and she's extremely out of breath. She sounds like she's running.
All that could be heard was the caller's frantic breaths. Operators did not know what was going on. All they could do was send first responders to the location and wait. These first responders had no idea what sort of scene they were walking into. It was a country back lane, isolated and dark, with a service broken up by tractor ruts and fire tracks. It seemed strange that anyone would drive down this road if they weren't a farmer. At first, the responders couldn't see anyone. Perhaps the call was a crank call or a mistake. When the first responders spotted Chacey Poynter, she was barefoot and covered in mud.
What's going on?
My husband, he went to go help me. My Jeep is stuck in the back, around the corner, and he's been shot in the head, please.
She appeared to be out of her mind with fear, hyperventilating. An ambulance arrived on the scene and paramedics supplied her with oxygen. They also took note of the blood spatter on her clothes, which covered her shoulder and her legs.
Tell us what happened.
I heard a shot, and the Jeep started rolling, and I didn't see anything, and I saw a shadow. That's all I saw.
Further down the road, which was pitch black at night, investigators found Chacey's Jeep. There was the silhouette of a man inside it, a man who was already dead. The figure was that of Chacey's husband, Bob Poynter. The 47-year-old firefighter had been shot in the head, but there was no sign of a struggle. In fact, the scene seemed to match up with what the young mother had told the first responders in her state of panic, that a random attacker had come out of the dark and shot her husband. But back in the ambulance, Chacey was sharing details with the police about her relationship that started to cast doubt on the story that'd been told.
We've been having problems. I was coming to meet him at the Jack in the Box so we could talk.
Chacey told officers that her marriage to Bob had been on the rocks for quite some time. Her husband had just been killed, so why was she focusing on marital harmony? Chacey went on to explain that she and Bob had arranged to meet at a Jack in the Box fast food restaurant so they could talk their troubled marriage over. While driving there, she texted him to tell him she was 3 miles away. As she texted him, her Jeep got stuck in the rutted mud of the rural road she was taking. Police asked Chacey why she had taken this track, which was designed mainly for farmers to access their field and was badly lit for driving at night. She said she had missed her turn.
Gonna meet him up at the Jack in the Box. I don't ever take this road.
All right. What made you come down this one?
I missed my last one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've never been down this road before.
Now, stuck on this desolate country road, the young woman called her husband Bob for help. He didn't hesitate. As a firefighter, he was well used to coming to the rescue. Bob got into his truck and drove towards the location Chacey had described. But the road surface was too rough and the ruts too deep for his truck to make it all the way to her Jeep. Bob got out of his vehicle and approached his wife's Jeep on foot. Chacey waited on the side of the road while Bob got into the Jeep and tried to reverse it. That was when she heard the gunshot. She jumped back into the Jeep. Bob, having been shot, was no longer in control of the car, and it was rolling slowly down the road. Chacey was holding his head, she told police, which was why she was covered in blood. She put the car in park, calling his name, but Bob was already dead. Bob had been shot in the right temple. It was difficult to determine whether he had been shot from in front or behind the car. The assailant had left no clues behind. With this lack of physical evidence, the police had to focus their investigation on Chacey's story. She said she saw a man at the scene.
There was a man. There's a tall person. That's all I know.
Okay.
He was taller than me.
And what was he wearing?
Dark clothes is all I know. Dark.
Did you see any type of firearm, rifle, or anything like that in his hands?
No.
Was Chacey telling the truth, or did she know more than she was letting on?
I was young and stupid when we got married. I didn't want to be married anymore.
What do y'all fight over?
My daughter. He's trying to take my daughter away from me.
Why would he try to take your daughter away? Like, what reason did he give you?
Because he knows that that's what's going to hurt me the most.
As the police questioned her back at the station, the now widowed Chacey kept on returning to the state of her marriage.
I loved him. I really did love him. We've had a lot of issues in our marriage.
It was becoming eerily clear that though she claimed her husband had been killed by a random gunman, in fact, Chacey herself had a motive for Bob's murder. Though Chacey and Bob's marriage had begun with passionate mutual infatuation, 3 years after their wedding, it had begun to decay. They slept in separate bedrooms, and Chacey believed Bob was still in love with his first wife. She also claimed he had a temper. He had low testosterone levels and was taking medication to supplement it, which, according to Chacey, led to violent outbursts.
There would just be times, he would grab me by my hair. I could get thrown up against the wall.
Bob's family with his first wife denied that he could be capable of hurting anyone. His daughter Natalie had lived with Bob and Chacey for 6 months when she was 16, and she said she never saw him become violent in that time. Chacey refuted this.
They've never really cared for me from the beginning. I was the younger girl that came in and took their father.
Chacey said she never told anyone about the way Bob treated her because she didn't want to jeopardize his job as a fire captain, which gave him an important role in the community. Instead, she began to seek validation elsewhere. A few years into their marriage, Chacey lost 104 pounds and started going out more. This was when Natalie, Bob's teenage daughter, found evidence on Chacey's computer that she'd been talking to other men. Bob frequently worked overnight shifts at the firehouse, giving Chacey ample opportunity to go out and meet men, leaving Natalie and her then 4-year-old half-sister alone in the house. When Natalie finally told her father that he was being cheated on, he drew up the paperwork for divorce but never followed through on filing it. He didn't want to break up his family a second time. Still, Bob was now suspicious of Chacey. He installed a security camera by the front door to catch her in the act, and 12 days before his murder, he succeeded. One of Chacey's lovers rang the doorbell. Chacey ran to answer it, telling him he had to leave immediately. But it was too late. Bob knew. For the police, 2 different pictures were emerging of Bob and Chacey Poynter's marriage. That their relationship had been strained, in danger of collapse, was not in question. But which story was true? Had Bob been a violent, distant husband, or was Chacey unfaithful? Either way, one thing was certain. No matter how much Chacey denied it, the breakdown of their relationship had something to do with Bob's mysterious killing. The week before his death, the couple had gone on a trip to Mexico to try to work things out. But when they returned, Bob told a coworker that it had ended disastrously. He reportedly said regarding the marriage, "I just can't do this anymore." This was Wednesday, September 7th. On Friday, September 9th, Bob was murdered. Chacey said she'd been at a friend's house that night before leaving to meet up with Bob at the restaurant.
Whose house was that?
Michael Garza.
Are you and Michael Garza dating or anything like that? Do y'all have a relationship?
Yes.
She'd been having a relationship with Michael Garza since that same summer after meeting him on Facebook. Michael Garza, 37, was a truck driver. He'd spent a year in prison in 2000 for the unauthorized use of a vehicle. But he had no recorded history of violent behavior. Still, police were suspicious. If Bob's killer had been a random stranger as Chacey claimed, why would the killer let her escape alive? The evidence, contrary to her story, suggested she knew the killer. In interrogation, the police pushed her.
I think you're full of crap. I want her
I'm
to pull
telling
the
you,
trigger.
I don't know who pulled the trigger.
See, I think you do, and that's the problem.
No, I don't.
Finally, 2 hours in, Chacey's story crumbled.
Who killed your husband? Who shot Robert? Can you say that louder for me, please?
I did.
Mikey could only be one person, Michael Garza. Chacey's lover had murdered her husband. Close to being implicated in the crime herself, Chacey now changed her story.
I just don't want to do it. I want him to know what it's like to be bullied all the time.
Chacey said that she had planned for Garza to scare Bob into leaving her alone. As the story went, she hadn't intended for Bob to get hurt, and she didn't realize that Garza had brought a shotgun with him. It was Garza's plan to lure Bob to the rural country road, she said, and she could never have expected what he planned to do. They went there together, and she asked Bob to come get her. Then, before she could stop him, Garza killed Bob. The police didn't believe this story, not least because Garza had no history of violence. But there was more. Just a few months earlier, Chacey had convinced Bob to make her the primary beneficiary of his $685,000 life insurance policy. The day before his death, September 8th, he had contacted a divorce attorney on Facebook telling them, "I'm thinking of a surprise attack." This attack entailed putting their house up for sale and taking custody of their daughter. Chacey couldn't let him do this. She solicited sympathy from her lovers by telling them Bob was abusive. The lover caught in the security footage, Brad Golden, was interrogated too.
I'm telling you, man, this girl was good at what she did. She always told me that Robert was abusive to her.
8 days before the murder, she texted a third lover, Danny Mims, saying about Bob that "I wish he'd run out of air in a fire." Mims replied, I'm not a magician. To that, Chacey texted back, well, I need one. Each of these lovers refused to do what she wanted, to kill her husband for her. Each of them, that is, except Michael Garza. She texted Garza from Mexico saying, he's coming after me sooner or later. Garza responded, F him. No, I will shoot that dude. And the day before the murder, the day Bob contacted a divorce lawyer, she texted Garza and said, I've made up my mind. The evidence was mounting that Chacey herself had arranged the murder. On September 10th, the day after Bob's death, the 29-year-old widow was arrested. In court, she did not take the stand, but jurors were shown police body cam footage and interrogation tapes. These tapes included a final incriminating moment. Chacey alone in the interview room with her head in her hands. Michael Garza was sentenced to 99 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Chacey Poynter, too, was found guilty of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 30 years' time when she is 59. To this day, Chacey maintains that she never intended her husband to die. What are your thoughts on this disturbing story? Did Garza really act to kill Bob on his own, or did Chacey plan for her husband to die? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, keep up with our channel, and we'll see you very soon on the Decoder.